the Army, I'm going to sleep on a dirt trench. And I didn't know about the rest. And I said, at least I knew this from another sailor I knew. You sleep in a bed every night. And I said, that's going to be for me.
Okay. Okay. Do you recall your first days in service? Like your training, your initial...
Well, yeah, I remember we were trained in Sampson, Rhode Island, Sampson, New York. And while we were training up there, I joined the choir. And we left the camp and went out like on weekends and sang for different groups up in Sampson.
Okay. That sounds great. Well, it's good to know that you're a good singer. What did it feel like to have just joined the military?
I don't know. You're just built up with pride being in it. You really are.
Okay.
I was pride enough that I could tell you right now, I felt like staying 20 years in the service.
Okay. Okay. Tell me about your boot camp and your training experiences.
Well, that was about it. I mean, it was marching, learning how to swim, if you didn't know how to swim.
Did you know how to swim
Yeah.
before you joined?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only thing that scared me was going off that 20-foot tower.
Oh, to jump in the water?
Yeah.
Oh, you had to do that?
Yeah, you had to do that because, well, for all you know, you might be on an aircraft carrier and it's 40 feet to the water, so
Right.
just want to know that you can do it.
Okay. How long was your training? Do you remember?
I think it was 8 weeks
And where were you stationed?
in Sampson.
Okay. You were stationed in Sampson for your training. Okay.
And I went from there to Newport, Rhode Island for gunnery school
Okay. So target practicing and learning how to use the gun.
and learning how to take them apart and put them together.
Really, a big 5-inch gun.
Oh,
You
yeah.
learned how to take those apart and put them
Yeah.
together. Wow.
And the breech block in that weighs over 40 pounds,
Wow.
a solid piece of steel.
Wow.
And they were something to repair.
I'll bet they were. Do you remember your instructors?
No, but we had a good one, and I was trained on 20 millimeters. And after the training of it, I could take a 20 millimeter apart in less than a minute and put it back together in less than a minute and a half.
Wow.
And it has 44 parts.
Wow. That's amazing.
So it was an experience.
Very good training, in other words.
Yeah.
They really got you very disciplined. What's the difference between a 20 millimeter and a 5-inch? Close?
Huh?
The 5 inches,
A 5-inch is round.
right?
A 20 millimeter is about that big.
Okay, so there's a pretty substantial difference.
Yeah.
Why did they train you with a 20 millimeter then? Because you were using it.
Well, a 20 millimeter gun is one of the most guns on a destroyer.
Okay,
And then you have the 40 millimeter, which is like 4 guns in one.
right.
And they had maybe, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 40 millimeter guns.
Mm-hmm.
They had 15 20 millimeters.
Okay,
And then you had the 5-inch, which are, 2, 4, 6.
okay, okay. How did you get through it? How did you get through your training? Did you have to psych yourself up, or was it kind of tough to deal with all the heavy, strenuous training?
It might have been with some of the people, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every minute of it.
You did.
Yeah.
You really did.
Whatever it was, I got into it and, hope I come out the other end.
You just threw yourself into it.
Little macho
Yeah.
man.
Did you lose a lot of weight when you went through your training?
No, that's the funny part. I went into the service at 140 pounds and I come out 140 pounds.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I never gained, never lost.
Wow.
It's when I got out that I started to gain. I guess they're eating different. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, and you served in World War II, correct?
Right.
Okay. When you finished your training, why don't you describe to us where you went after that?
Well, we went to Newport for gunnery school.
Okay.
And then I was shipped up to Boston.
Okay.
And we stayed in the Fargo building. That's where they made the crew for the ships.
Okay.
That's where they got them all back together. And then we commissioned the destroyer in the Boston shipyard.
Okay, so the Drexler was commissioned in the Boston
Right.
shipyard.
We went out with a brand new ship.
Okay.
And we went from there on breakdown, break down the ship.
Uh-huh.
And then it was finally to leave. We escorted the Bonami Richard aircraft down to Trinidad.
Oh, okay.
And on that trip, like I was telling you before, we were all babies on that ship practically. We got a general quarters alarm, and we're all scared stiff. And come to find out, about 15 minutes after we got into it, we were excited over a big, giant sea turtle. Everybody thought it was a submarine.
Okay.
But it was the beginning to know what you were going to go through.
Okay.
We went into Trinidad, left there, went into Panama City, and that was my first liberty off the ship. And
What was Panama City like?
I don't know.
You did-
Every one of us headed up for a bar.
Okay. So you saw the bars in
Yeah,
Panama.
that was it.
about-
You didn't go much further because
Okay.
you didn't have the time, because we were going through the Panama Canal.
What was
going
that?
out
Pretty
to-
fascinating to see the Panama Canal.
Oh, that is a trip in itself. You just can't believe what them people did way back when, 1921 or something in there, when they built it.
Not sure.
Just amazing that the ships that can go through there. And when you go in and you just sit there and the ship rises 30 feet, then you sail off. Then when you get to the other end, your ship goes down 30 feet and off into the Pacific. But we went to San Diego
Okay.
and we stayed there maybe a week, two, something like that.
So I assume you had shore leave in San
Yeah.
Diego and
And I just went out and had fun.
okay.
And then we took off and went to Honolulu,
Okay.
Hawaii. And we gathered provisions and everything else, and ammunition, whatever we used. We did a lot of practice on the way out.
Okay.
We had these planes go by and we
Towing targets.
trailing these targets, and we would shoot the targets and all that.
Uh-huh.
In other words, it was keeping you tight.
Right.
And we got out there and stayed a week or two, I think, and then we took off for Guadalcanal
Okay.
in that area.
When you were shooting the targets, were you a pretty good marksman? Were you the man who was actually operating the guns, or describe in a little bit more detail what?
Well, my part of the gun crew, we had a crew of 13 in the mount, number one mount.
Okay.
And mine was called a sight seer, sight setter.
Sight center.
And because the mount was trained by radar up above, so I had a dial, and I had to keep the middle dial, the points together. I had to follow that outside and keep them as close as possible. So I was winding back and forth just to keep them thing in line. And it was the guy behind me did the elevation, I did the training. And I did the horizontal, he did the vertical. And so I never knew what was going on outside. We sat in two little seats, and to this day, I went on a cruiser down in Fall River. It was or not a cruiser, I mean a destroyer,
Similar ship.
very similar. I could not get into the space that I sat in during the war.
So it was a
And
very
there was
tight space.
two of us that sat there. And today, I could not get in that space
Wow.
on a ship that was down there.
Wow.
But no, that was my job to do.
Now, you went to Guadalcanal, you said, from Honolulu. Describe what it was like to arrive in Guadalcanal and share a little bit about your experiences.
It was amazing. It was truly amazing.
This is
Because
obviously after
we went
the
in
Battle
there,
of Canal.
yeah, we went in there, and I never thought I'd see so many ships in my life, all fighting ships. I mean, you look out, you get on deck and look around, and there's just hundreds of ships all over the place, and it's all ours,
Right.
But it was just amazing to see all that. And then we left there and went north.
How long were you at Guadalcanal, do you remember? Several days or?
I think about a week.
Okay.
Reprovised gas, or fuel, and we headed north.
Did you get
Out
on
of there.
shore, so you were able to get on Guadalcanal?
No,
So you never saw Henderson Field? Or...
no, never saw any of that. But when we pulled into what was called Iron Bottom Bay. And as we pulled in and was going to drop anchor and everything else, the announcement come over, there will be no swimming while we're here. Because everybody was wanting to go swimming because you're cool and everything else. And the anchor went down, and the second lieutenant went off the bridge, pew, into the water. And everybody followed him.
So you
Now
just
the
made
reason,
the rules a little
yeah,
bit.
but the reason they didn't want us to swim is because there were so many Japanese ships in that. That's why it was called Iron Bottom Bay.
Right.
All their ships had been sunk, and all them guys were in there, and they said the place was filled with sharks. But we never saw one.
Huh.
But I think at the time, I don't think anybody cared. They just wanted to get a swim.
Right.
So we all went over the rail.
That's part of being boys.
Yeah,
Boys and
It's like a big swimming pool.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
So you were there for.
We had a land party, and we went in, and it was only to go in and play ball, and if you want to just sit around on the beach or whatever, and they had plenty of beer. They afforded us the beer, and we played ball and had a good time, and then back to the ships. But that's as far as you could go.
Okay. So
And,
you were just on the shore then of
Yeah.
Guadalcanal.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was it for Guadalcanal, because then we left and started going north up to the other islands,
Okay.
Tarawa and all them.
You went to Tarawa next?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's when we were, what I was explaining before, Coconut Beach, Coconut Shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And we would cruise off the shore, maybe about 100 yards, maybe a little less, I don't know. But if a tree moved, we blew it off the earth,
Really?
because they were snipers that would shoot the ships from the tree. They'd stay up in the tree and shoot at us.
Was this before the troops actually went into Bedio, which was the land?
Yeah,
So you were part of the preparation
exactly,
for the land,
exactly,
and you did some shelling of the beaches.
exactly. I
Coconut
think there was maybe 30 ships that shelled that island
Okay.
all at once.
Okay.
And it was like a 4th of July. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Now I know the battle to take Bedio, which was the main island in
Yeah.
Tarawa in the atoll, lasted about 3.5 days.
Yeah.
Were you there for the entire show?
No, we left.
Okay.
We left because the big ships came in,
Right.
the battle wagons, and they could do more damage than we could, so they sent us up north again.
Okay. Could you tell me the size of your ship? Your ship was a destroyer. Where it fit in the pecking order. In other words, what ships were larger than your destroyer?
Well, you had the cruisers,
Which were larger?
yeah, and then the destroyer, the cruisers, and then the battleships, and then the aircraft carriers.
Okay.
So ours was like bottom of the group.
Okay.
The only thing below us was a minesweeper,
Oh.
and that only had a crew of maybe 60 people.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to be on that.
How many crew members were on your ship?
300 and,
Was it 20?
huh?
It's got the numbers in there, 320, 360, something like that. And half
Yes,
of them were,
I think it was about 350.
On your ship.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you were at Tarawa. You participated in the preparation for the landing. Your job was done. Where did you go from there?
Okinawa.
You went straight to Okinawa.
Raced to Okinawa.
Okay. So at that point, it was already 1945.
Yep.
How much time do you think there was between Tarawa and getting to Okinawa? Were you at sea for a couple of weeks, or
No.
no, just a few?
I don't know how long it took. I couldn't really tell you.
Probably a few days or
Yeah.
a couple of days.
A few days, 3 days, something like that.
Okay.
And that was where we ended up with like I said, just like before, hundreds of ships. Unbelievable, outside of Okinawa.
So at that point, when you arrived at Okinawa, nobody on your ship had become a casualty yet.
No.
You'd had no damage to your ship.
No.
Nothing had happened to the men. Okay. So Okinawa was probably the closest exposure that you had to combat.
Oh yeah,
Would that be fair to say?
yeah.
Okay.
Because they put us on these picket lines, and that deal is a line of ships between Okinawa and Japan,
Okay.
and we were like the a pre-warning to the island that the Japanese were coming in with their airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
So we would fire at them, you know, because we the
Well, you were meant to
watchdog.
intercept Japanese planes.
Yeah.
Is that the idea? Or to draw the attention of Japanese planes
Right.
so that they couldn't go do anything on the island
Right,
itself.
and let the island know that here they come. If they got by us, you know, here they come. They're going to bomb the landing and all that, whatever they do, you know. But we were pre-warned that here comes the enemy.
Okay.
Well, the Japanese found out that we were there, and they started saying, "Well, we got to get rid of that land, that island, that line of ships."
Right.
And so they started attacking the ships.
Had the landings already begun at that point? There were already American troops.
Oh, we were
fighting?
already on Okinawa.
Because Okinawa, I believe, as a campaign lasted more
Yeah.
than 2 months, if
Right.
I'm not mistaken.
And so we had done the picket line, I think it was 3 times. We shot a few down. But you would be out there for a day or 2 and then get offline
Okay.
and come back in and, you know, refill everything, fuel.
So you would get
ammunition and all
offline
that,
to
yeah.
restock your provisions.
So we had done our time,
Okay.
but they were hitting us so bad that they sent us back out there. And that's when we got hit.
Okay.
Because the ship in front of us got hit, we got sunk. The ship behind us got hit, the ship behind him got sunk. That's
Okay.
the way it was. It was, you know,
Now, prior to the day on which your ship was sunk, were there casualties at that point on your boat?
no, there was no casualties.
So everybody
We were
stayed
clear.
intact.
Yep.
Okay.
Probably the only casualty would have been somebody falling off the second deck.
Okay. Okay. Can you describe, prior to the sinking, can you describe any memorable experiences that you can recall while you were in that picket line? Just anything that got your adrenaline going or that you remember?
Yes, your adrenaline was always going because you were on standby corps, GQ,
On alert all the
on
time.
alert all the time.
Right.
And we were supposed to be on our guns. Well, actually, we sat in our guns, sat on them.
Uh-huh.
It was like a half GQ.
Right.
And you would get relieved and go down and get your dinner, lunch, whatever it was, and then get back on the gun immediately. But you could relax at the gun.
Right.
You know, you didn't have to sit there with a trigger ready to go.
Right.
You just
That
sit
was
and
the
relax and
semi-alert.
enjoy the scenery, which was nothing but water.
Was it very uncomfortable or hot in the turret? Or
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, it was hot.
So you did some sweating.
It was really hot. Most
Perhaps
of
that's why you stayed at 140 pounds.
probably
Because you
was.
sweated all
It
day.
probably was. I mean, we were in T-shirts. Everybody was in T-shirts. You know, he wasn't fully dressed.
Right.
T-shirt, shorts, shoes, and that was it.
That was it.
That was your uniform. Our captain had one thing that he wanted from the time we started from Boston. Every Sunday, everybody had to wear a hat.
Every Sunday.
Every Sunday. And we did. All the way through to the time we were sunk. Every Saturday, you had a white hat on.
Wow.
It designated that day. I don't know what his reason was or anything else, but
Maybe
we
he
all went
wanted
along with it.
a little discipline.
Yeah.
Just once a week or
Yeah.
something like that. Do you remember your fellow crew members in your turret? Did you become close friends with any of them?
Only one, the one that you saw the picture, was from Pawtucket,
Okay.
Collins.
Was he the fellow who was killed?
The young guy I knew, but not personally, you know what I'm saying? But I knew of him because we came from the same town.
Okay.
And the others, I was friends with a kid from New York, from Queens. And I learned later that he was killed instantly from the first plane. But
Did
this latent date, it's hard to remember the people.
Well, what was the name of the one who was your friend, who you got to know well?
Collins, I think it is, in that paper
Okay,
on the Pawtucket thing.
Collins, okay.
Yeah.
What was his role? What role did he play?
Oh, he was a boatswain mate,
Okay,
and he was the gun captain of the crew.
so he commanded the 13th.
He commanded the turret.
Okay,
He was the one that's up in that little cubby hole looking out.
okay. Did he survive the war?
Yeah, as far as I know, he did.
You did not.
But we've never seen each other since.
You haven't seen each other since
No.
the war. Okay,
No.
all right. Well, why don't you describe the day that you engaged the Kamikaze planes and that you were sunk? And please take as much time as you need to describe that as best
Yeah, well,
you can, as detailed as you can.
it was our fourth time out on the picket line, which we weren't supposed to be there, but they were hitting us so hard. So we alternated on and off, on and off.
Okay.
And then we got the call, and they were coming at us, and the first plane, now the best way I can describe it, if anybody understands what a DC-10 is, the size of the plane,
Yes,
that's what attacked us, two of them, the size of that plane,
they were very large.
twin motors.
They were twin-motored planes.
Yeah.
So they were not fighter planes.
Not really,
They were
not
larger,
really.
like
They were
fighter
strictly using them as suicide planes.
Okay.
They came in, and the captain announced, "We're going to get hit." And he no sooner said that than the whole ship was rocking, because that first plane hit us on the starboard side aft.
Okay.
And he hit right where the storage of ammunition for the third turret was.
Ah.
So it did a large damage, which I couldn't describe because I never saw it, but I heard of it. The second one come across, and somehow we think he got chicken or something. He pulled up and went right across my mount and left a tire mark across the top of it, which I didn't know until the guy, the gun captain said, "My God, he left it. We're still lucky." But it went out and made a turn, and everybody said that he was in perfect control of that plane because of the bank he did come back around, and he hit us amidships right between the two stacks, which tipped us over on the opposite side from the first one. And that's when it was a scramble to get the hell out of that turret. I jumped down through the scuttlebutt, whereas the shells from our gun fly out of the turret. There's a big square hole, maybe 2.5 feet square.
And that's known as the scuttlebutt?
Yeah.
Okay.
I dived right out through that, and like I said, I scratched myself here and there, you know, getting out and getting through it. And by the time I hit the deck, the ship was already tilted a little more than 45 degrees. And I got my foot tangled in the netting, and I shook that off. And next thing I know, I was twirling over and over and around and over, and I didn't know what was going on.
You were falling or you were in
Yeah.
the air?
No, I was in the water.
Oh,
So it was evidently a whirlpool,
yes.
because the ship sinking causes them.
Right.
And when I finally got above water, I looked up and I was at least 200-300 yards away from the ship. So I figured that whirlpool I was in just carried me right off. So, you know, and I could hear the guys screaming, and everything else was on the fire because the water was all on fire.
Had the ship already gone down
Yeah.
at that point?
Yeah.
It was submerged, it was gone.
And the oil had caught fire, and I could hear these guys screaming and everything else.
Men were being burned
And
badly.
so I'm treading water, and then I see this raft. And I was good. I swam over to it, I climbed on it, and there was a guy laying in it. And I mean, he was all oil and blood. And I mean, he was awful. And I knew he was really, really hurt. And there was nothing I could do for him. But at least we were on the raft. And by then, we saw these other ships coming along. It helped pick us up. While I was in Newport, just to go back a little, I was bored. So I started to learn semaphore. It was just something to do. And I said, you know, if I'm aboard ship and we got another ship somewhere, we could talk back and forth. So me and another guy, we practiced between each other, learned how to do it. Now they come back to the raft. I stood up and I could see the ships, and one was flashing a light. And so I stood up and I did a semaphore, and I says, man badly hurt. Please pick us up. And they come right away. And they took him up on, it was an LCI, and they dragged him up the side. And they sooner did that than the ensign that was the captain of that ship started to go. Now here I am in the raft, sliding down the side of the ship, right towards the propellers. And I'm screaming.
You up. They did not,
Huh?
They did not pick you
No,
up.
they didn't pick me up. They picked the wounded
They
fellow.
sort of forgot about you
Yeah,
momentarily.
and well, this guy was anxious, I think, because he didn't want to stand still,
Right,
which is a bad thing to do out there.
right.
But I started screaming and kicking, and finally the propellers stopped. Evidently they called up to him to, you know, stop it. And I kicked myself clear of the ship on the guards that go around the propellers. That's what I was kicking to get away from those propellers. And they kind of backed up a little and they picked me up. And I went from there, I went to a big, like freighter. And it was,
Was it a hospital ship or?
no, it wasn't a hospital ship. It was like a big tanker. And they had emptied it out and made bunk beds in the whole thing. They put us on that because now we were going back to Hawaii. And they had a big conference, had everybody up there, and they was telling us, if we hear a general alarm, we want you all to go to your bunk beds. And you think anybody got an alarm was going to go to their bunk beds after what we just gone through? No way. We did get one, and everybody was at topside, scurrying around to hide somewhere. And they gave us hell about it. You ain't gonna catch me down below, not after we knew what happened to our fellow mates, you know, because we had, well, the engine crew, the, I can't think of what the hell they call it now, they control the ship. In the middle of the ship there's a room with all this equipment that controls everything on the ship. Those guys and a few others went to the bottom of the ocean, 3,000 feet alive. But they never got out of that. So everybody knew that. They weren't going to catch us aboard underneath, below decks. No way.
Did you ever find out what happened to the badly injured fellow who was on the raft
No,
with you?
no, I didn't even know who he was or anything else. But I estimated that he was evidently blown off the ship.
Was he
From the-
badly
from the
burned,
two-
or he was just covered?
Yeah, no, he was burned. Cuts all over him, oil all over him. No, I don't know how he survived to get to that raft. But I figure when the second plane hit us, it blew the ship like in half, and he was in that area somewhere and got blown off. You know, and that's how he got all his wounds and everything else. That was my idea of what happened to him. I don't know. I don't even know who he was. But I figured maybe somewhere in my life I did save somebody. You know,
You did your best to try to save him. That's all you can do.
that's all you can do.
So you went to Hawaii.
And then we went back to Hawaii, and
Did they?
all the way back there I gambled. We played poker, and I was great at it. I won $800. From Hawaii back to the States, I changed games to dice, and I was $200 in the hole when I got to San Francisco.
How long were you in Hawaii on your way back?
Just enough time to fuel.
Okay.
I fueled the ship up, And they dressed us up. They got all new clothes and everything else. And then it was off to San Francisco.
Okay. How long were you in San Francisco?
About 3 days.
Okay.
And once you're in battle like that, and that thing's happening, you get 30-day leave,
Okay.
or 35-day leave, 5 days for travel.
Okay.
You had your choice. You go by plane, which in them days was rickety, or go by train, which was very, wasn't comfortable.
That, you mean once you're back in the United States,
Right.
this is the way you...
And you had your choice of a bus. I took the bus. I was the only one in the whole crew that took the bus.
Okay.
And I had a friend, and he was laughing at me and everything else. But I said, I don't care. I'm going to see some part of the United States where you're going to just go flashing by everything. He says, well, we all end up at New York Grand Central. And so they had a big board up there for the servicemen.
At the Grand Central.
At the Grand Central, you leave messages to everybody, I says, I'll tell you what, whoever gets there, we'll leave a message down in the lower left corner. And what time and everything else that you got there. Mm-hmm. So I come across country, had a hell of a time.
How long did it take you to cross the United States?
5 days. But I'll tell you, it was something else. That's when I found out how divided America is. Because we were having a ball all the way from San Francisco all the way to Chicago. Singing and dancing, and they'd stop. We'd have a ball eating at these different restaurants they would stop at. And having a great time. When we get into Chicago, got off the bus, went through the station, got on another bus, headed for Providence. And I said to the guy who was sitting on me, I said, boy, ain't this great? I said, it's nice and comfortable and living. Yeah. That was the whole conversation that we held all the way to Providence. It's totally different people. And the separation with Chicago. But I took it anyway. But when we got into Chicago, I went to the board,
You mean
and there
when
was
you
a little...
got into Grand Central in New
Yeah.
York, you mean? Okay.
I went to the board, and there's a little note from Jim, his name was. He'd got in 4 hours before me. And I says, wow, who got the better of that trip?
Well, why did it take so long for him to get out?
He had an 8-hour layover somewhere,
Okay.
and I didn't. I was always traveling.
He took the train, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stop and go, stop
Yeah.
and go.
Very similar time frames to
Yeah.
get there. Okay.
But he had an 8-hour layover that he'd wait for a train coming through. I didn't. It was the same bus all the way. Old rickety bus. We had a great time singing and having a hell of a time on that. It was a great trip. I enjoyed it tremendously. And I always said, boy, if I get out of the service, maybe I'd like to drive a bus cross country.
So what did you do when you got to New York City? What happened then?
In New York City?
Yes, your end of the line was New York, Grand Central. So what happened after that?
Well, we had to find a bus station. Because they told us, when you're off here, that you got to go through the central station and then you pick up a bus over there. And that was it. You were gone. So we never, I don't think I was 2 hours in Grand Central.
And then you
With the
went
Max.
to Pawtucket
Yep.
and
Providence.
to Providence to be
All the
with
way
your
to
family.
Providence. I got into Providence, and I didn't have a dime on me. And I says, well, I can't take a trip again. I said, the hell with it. So I grabbed a taxi. I said, take me to where I live, So he drove me all the way to Pawtucket. I got out of there. I says, hold on. I went in the house. My aunt lived downstairs, my mother upstairs. My aunt was happy to see me. So I says, will you pay the taxi driver? So she did. And I think it was something like $10 at that time. Today it would cost 40.
Right.
But no, she paid the taxi, and she says, that's a hell of a way to travel. I says, yeah, but it's cheap, And then I had my 35 days, and that's when I got into that situation where I had to tell that mother about her son, which I'll never do again. Never. I'll leave it
Very
up.
hard to do.
Very hard. Very, very hard. And I don't know to this day how state troopers can tell parents that their sons are killed. Whew, that is unbelievable. That was her only relative. She was alone. I'd say around 60, 65. And her son was the only relative she had. So there she was. He was gone. He wasn't coming back at all because he was in that control room. So, but I will never ever do that again for anybody. It's too tough. Whew.
What happened after the end of your leave?
I reported to Boston. And they put me on a seagoing tug. I was the only gunner's mate on that tug. And when I went down the pier to get on it, they were taking off this 3-inch gun. Oh, that's the range of guns. I forgot to tell you about the 3-inch. But they were taking the whole mount off the seagoing tug. And I said, well, what do they need a gunner's mate for? So my job was to count the ammunition for the 45s that the officers had, and then do routine work on the ship. And so every 4 days I had to go down to the gun locker room, count all the ammunition, mark it down, date, time, and that was it. A gunner's mate on a seagoing tug.
Now, where did you go on that boat? Where did it go?
Well, we went to, from Boston, we would go up to Bath, Maine. And we would either tow a ship or barges from there down to New London.
Connecticut.
In Connecticut. And we had an experience there. I think it was the second trip, we were towing 2 barges. And when the sea tug, we tow them like 400, 500 yards behind. Long. And we're coming into Cape Cod. We had to go through the canal. So then you would reel them back in close to within 100 feet. In the meantime, we're coming into the canal. One of our guys on the ship said he's had enough of the Navy, went overboard. He jumped over. Well, now here it is, man overboard. We're towing these 2 tugs. What do we got to do? We can't go into the canal. We got to make a circle. We in the Cape Cod Bay, and made a big circle to come back around and pick him up. But in the meantime, somebody on a small boat had seen it. So he went over and picked him up, which made it much easier for us. But he come along ship, brought him up aboard, and they locked him down in the chain locker until we got back to Boston. And but he was going to do a section, what they call a Section 8 weirdo, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And but they locked him up, and when we got back to Boston, they took him, you know, off to the hospital. But we went through the canal down to the thing on the canal with that seagoing captain. Once the pilot took over the ship, which no captain could go to do that, they had to have a pilot. He was down on the stern fishing. He loved cod, and that's what he used to catch. And everybody said, "Oh God, we're going to have cod for supper tonight." And but
He's got fish.
and he fished that whole canal all the way through. And when the pilot said, "Okay, it's back in your command," that was the end of his fishing trip. And whatever he caught was down in the galley. So, you know, I had an interesting life in the Navy. I loved it. I wanted to do 20 years in the service, but I didn't.
Tell them about Torpedo Bay.
Let me ask you a quick question though. When you were on this seagoing tug, did you stay on that for the duration of the war? Or you did not go back to the Pacific at that point?
No.
Okay.
Torpedo Bay. We used to go
I don't know when I did that.
down Narragansett Bay when you.
That was before.
Or sub
That was before I was on the tug.
for torpedoes.
I can't remember. Anyway, I was.
Were you on the tugs until Japan surrendered?
Yeah,
You were. Okay.
yeah, because I went on what they call Seaman Guard.
Okay.
You know, they have the MPs, Well, I was an SG,
Okay.
and the war was over, so they dressed us up in these pants and a band and a hat.
Gaitered.
And yeah, and a nightstick. And said, get out there and keep things quiet.
And
Well,
where was this?
that was an experience because I was down alone. Usually you go in couples because, you know, trouble. You got two of you to take care of it, but they sent us out single
And where was this?
in Boston.
Okay.
So I'm walking around in Boston, you know, just don't know what to do. And I come across this guy in an in cave of a store, standing up, way up in there, and water running down the what's called. He's, you know, he was doing his duty. So I went back in there and I said, you can't do that. And I says, you know, I'm supposed to take you in. I said, be smart. I'll be smart if I want. He gave me a rough time. And he grabbed my stick and he was trying to hit me, and I got it back and I swacked him one. And by that time, another seaman guard had come along and saw this deal. So we packed him off into a van, and they take him back to the base. I don't know what they do then, but. And we split again, and I said, you know, this ain't for me. So I went to South Boston station, the rail station, got a cabinet, took my boots off, took the belt off, the stick, the armband, stuck them all in there, and I went out on liberty. And I celebrated the surrender of Japan
Wouldn't that
In
be
Boston.
AWOL?
in Boston.
Wouldn't that be going AWOL?
Is that an
Almost.
Almost.
Yeah, anyway, it was time to go back to the base. It was like 2:30 and between 1 and 2.
This was on VJ Day when,
Yeah.
when they announced the surrender.
And I couldn't find one of my boots, and the band was gone. My hat was gone. I must have been a little on the heavy side as far as liquor. And I come back into the base in Fargo building. It's called the Fargo building. And I come in and reported in, and the OD looked at me, officer of the day. He looked at me and says, you been on CG? I said, yeah. He said, well, get the hell out of here. He says, I want to just report you in, nothing else. Because I didn't have half my stuff or anything. He knew what happened.
What do you mean by CG?
Senior guard.
Oh, okay.
And I said, no, I'm gone. So he, get out of sight. He says, get upstairs, get out of sight. I don't want nobody else to see you. Because he was celebrating too, but he couldn't go out. So he just let me off the hook.
So what happened after that?
I think that's when I got sent back to Newport. It had to be. I was sent back to Newport, and I was on, not Goat Island, Gould Island in Newport. There's an island out there. Now it's a hotel and the whole thing. And they put me on a boat because I knew how to handle boats. Had nothing to do with my my rank of gunner's mate, and I got pretty good at that. That's where they used to train or test torpedoes. And I got on one of the boats that used to chase these torpedoes and pick them up. And of course my relatives all kid me about it because every time we go over the Jamestown Bridge, there's Torpedo Bay. They kid me about it because I talk about it so much. But it was a great time because they would fire these torpedoes up Narragansett. And I would have to go up and chase them, find them, tie them up and bring them back.
When you're out to sea, you mean? Out in the ocean?
No. This was up Narragansett Bay.
Oh, okay.
And shooting it right towards Providence.
Oh.
And only one or two always went astray and went up into Fall River.
And this was after the war.
Yeah.
The war is over now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I initiated the way of how to get them off the beach because they had a bigger ship with 4 or 5 crew. They would go up, anchor, and then the guy would swim in or take a boat in, tie it up, pull it back. Well, I found out a way of putting my boat right on the beach and jump off, tie it on, and then back off, pull it in, and take it down.
So these were dummy torpedoes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but they were testing the guidance system of them,
Guidance system.
you know, and a lot of them would come up surface, run right along the surface of the water.
Huh.
And sometimes we had to find them. We couldn't find them, but you could find the water, the bubbles coming off it. So we would drop a weight and a buoy right there, and then they would come up and dive for it. But I had a good time down there, and that's where I met my first wife.
Okay.
And of course we got married. And
And
then I got transferred from them to Beverly, Mass.
Okay.
And I was put on a minesweeper up there.
You were put on a minesweeper?
Yeah. There was a crew of 14, 15. And we never went out to war. We never went out. We stayed there tied right to the dark.
Okay.
We were the only Navy ship in the whole area. And we used to eat offshore. We'd go on shore to a diner, and they'd have dinner for us and everything else. We never ate on board. And I brought my wife up to Beverly. We had a nice apartment up there and everything else. She was pregnant. And I almost lost my eyesight there because it was a wooden ship. So we had to scrub the deck. And they had this strong lye bucket, and we pushed along with the mop. Well, I hit a knot, and the thing went over and splashed up all over me. And luckily, the guy that was with me knew what to do, and he washed out my eyes. But otherwise, I would have lost my sight entirely. And that was that little experience on that. And then my wife was about due, so I said, I got to get her out of here. So we borrowed a truck. Some guy up there I knew, and he says, yeah, I'll loan you my truck to go home. We had to go back to Newport. So we're going back to Newport, and down in Fall River, there's a big S-turn on Route 138, and it's downhill. And we're going down there, and all of a sudden I realized I got no brakes. No handbrake, no foot brake. And I'm sliding down this hill. I'm trying to run the gutter, you know, to rub the tires, but I jump it, and I get it back on the road. Get down around the bottom corner, and there's a state cop with his hand up. And I got my head out the window, and I'm screaming. I got the horn blowing. I said, I can't stop, I can't stop. And these people are coming out of church, walking across the street. To this day, so help me God, I don't know how I missed them. I went through them all. And of course, I guess I rolled about a mile or more before the thing finally stopped on its own. I got out of the truck. I knew he was going to come after me. And I'm standing by the truck waiting for you, and I can hear him. And zoom right by me. He comes back and he says, you know, are you a wise guy or something? I said, no. And I explained it all to him. So he called another trooper, and my wife went with him, and he got in the car with me. You know, all right, start up. I said, I got no brakes. He says, let's go. So I started up. I got about 20 miles an hour, and he said, all right, put on the brake. Slam, nothing. And he's grabbed the hand. And I grabbed the hand, nothing. We're still rolling. He said, stop this thing as soon as you can, because he got scared. And so, anyway, I got arrested. My father-in-law bailed me out. $20, big deal.
Okay. Well, this is all great. Let me go back and ask you a few questions about the time actually during the war, in the service during the war. How did you stay in touch with your family?
What's that?
How did you stay in touch with your family? Did you send a lot of letters when you?
Yeah, just some letters. That was it. I mean, it was only my mother and father,
Right.
my adopted parents, you know.
So you had no stepbrothers or stepsisters, or?
No.
Okay.
And I never had contact with my own brothers, my real brothers, or anything else during this whole time.
Okay.
It was after the war that I found out that they were in the Navy and all with the same rank, you know.
Right. Okay. What was the food like in the service when you were on?
The food was great.
It was.
It really was. I was very
That's the reason
surprised.
he joined, he said.
The only food we didn't have
Want me to warm that up?
No, it's okay.
was out in Well, I can't think of where it was, but the food wasn't that great, but it was edible. The best food I ever had was in the Fargo building when they were putting the crew together. We stayed in that building for maybe a month.
Was this at the
And
beginning?
I mean, you could eat all you wanted.
Was
and
it
it
after
was
the war or in the war?
Before.
Before, okay.
Before I went out to the Pacific.
Okay,
Before I got aboard ship.
okay,
They were putting the crew together.
okay.
That was the best food in the world. And if you wanted ice cream, he kept loading the bowl up until you said stop.
Okay. Did you feel a lot of pressure and stress when you were in the Pacific? Were there times, obviously you must have felt a great deal of pressure and stress the day that when you were in the picket line in Okinawa.
It was more anxiety. Being, what's going to happen? When's it going to happen?
It's the not knowing, the
Yeah.
waiting.
You knew something was going to happen, but you didn't know when or how, or if you were going to get bombed or torpedoed. And you'd go and you lay down in your bunk and you say, boy, if a torpedo comes through here, I've only got 3 8-inch steel between me and the water. And those torpedoes just go right through that like it's not in there.
Right.
And that was always on your mind, always thinking of what could happen to you. Yeah, I wasn't the only one that felt that way. Everybody did,
I'm sure.
all of us.
Now, you tell me again what you did for good luck.
For good luck,
Yes. You had your coin,
I only had my coin.
and tell us about that coin again, briefly, please.
When I got on the train to go to Sampson, my father was with me in Providence, the Providence train station. He says, here, this will save you. Which, I didn't think much of it, but I did take it. And, he was my adopted parent. I loved him. I loved her, my mother.
Silver dollar, was it?
And I stuck it in my pocket. And I went through training camp. And, well, anyway, that coin's at the bottom of the ocean in Okinawa.
So it
'Cause it was
stayed
in-
with you until you were sunk.
Yeah, it was in my locker.
Now, what did you guys do to entertain yourselves?
Card games.
Lots of card games.
That was it, card games.
Cribbage.
Did you ever see any entertainers? Bob Hope?
No,
Never had entertainers come?
none.
Okay.
Most of them went to bases,
Right,
but we weren't in the, if we were in the base, we were still aboard ship.
right.
So,
Now, when you were on leave, what did you do?
Tore up bars.
well, I had an excellent time in San Francisco.
On,
Oh, let me
on your
see.
return, after you...
Yeah, once I returned, they kept us there for about 5 days, so we could go out every night.
So you'd go to the bars and...
Yeah, go out a few bars. I wasn't a drinker. I did drink, but not, that's my life.
Right.
And went on a few dates. The best one's going way back when I was in Norfolk. It took me 4 hours to convince this girl to go out with me. She was in the consumer. I can't think of what the hell they called it. A lot of things had
USO.
a place for the servicemen to shop.
USO.
PX.
Yeah, PX, that's it. Thank you. And she was behind the counter. And I just took a real liking to her. And I started talking to her, and I asked her out. She said no. And I kept talking, and she kept saying no. And finally, she went to a girlfriend. She said, "What do you think?" And they made up between them. Well, maybe you ought to. He's this persistent. And so I went out with her. And she said, "Well, we're going to go home. He's going to go to my house." I said, "Okay." We got on this trolley car in Norfolk, Virginia now. We got on this trolley car. And we banged and bumped and banged. And I thought this thing was Tunaville Trolley. You remember them? Tunaville Trolley? Maybe you don't, but it was a famous cartoon. And this was a rickety old trolley car that bounced its way through the cartoons, and flying through the air and everything else. And that's all I could think of, was a Tunaville Trolley. and we finally stopped, and her house was just off the street, off the stop. But it was so far out into the woods, I had no idea where we were. And my God, if she kicks me out of the house now, I have no idea where to go or anything else. But it was fun.
That's good. Can you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events that happened while you were in the service during the war, or maybe a prank or anything like that that the guys played, or just something that sticks out in your mind?
But when you went over the equator or whatever,
Huh?
when you go over that certain point where you have to go over.
Oh, yeah, I became what the hell are they called? Shellback.
A shell.
You go over the divider, the
The equator?
what is it, the dividing line from North and South America.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go over that, you have to go through a commission. And you have to do certain things. If you're not a shellback, I can't think of what the hell they used to call us. But anyway, in order to get a shellback, you had to do certain things. So they would run you through a paddle line. You'd had to kiss this guy that was the king, Neptune, on the belly, you know, and his belly was full of grease and all that jazz. And I says, well, I knew what was going to happen. So I said, well, I'm going to be one of the first to go through, because once I become a shellback, I can revert back to paddling somebody. So I went through the line, and I was going down the side of the ship, going through the paddle line, and there was oil on the deck, and I slipped, and I cracked my head on one of the stanchions. And so they took me into first aid. They were mad at me because they were missing the fun, because they had to take care of me. So they just run a bandage all around my head with a pack on it. And I went back up, and I'm on where they come through the line to start. And everybody said, whoa, what happened to you? I said, oh, you don't know. And I scared them more just sitting there. Mm-hmm. And that was fun. That was fun.
Is that when you went over the equator?
Huh? Yeah, over the equator. That's the line I was talking about.
Like, what do they call it?
Well, I can tell I'm a little older because I'm forgetting a lot of words and diagrams.
It's like a hazing.
But I took, while I was in the Navy, I took an ICS course for mathematics. Mm-hmm. Now this kind of reverts back to when I was in school. I had a math teacher for my homeroom, and it ended up, I hated math. Oh God, I hated it with a passion. I got into the service, and I found this thing that you could take a course through the mail. Mm-hmm. And what do I take? Math. I took the course, and I went through math. Doing the lessons, you get a letter, and it's all the lessons on it. You do the lessons, you send them back, and you get it back again, you know, rated and all that. Mm-hmm. And I got all the way to logarithms. And then, because my wife got sick and everything else, and I had too much on my mind, I couldn't take it, so I kind of dropped out of it. Mm-hmm. I got out of that, I got out of the Navy and everything else. I went to work for Potter and Johnson's in Pawtucket, in Darlington. Mm-hmm. And I took the course again, because they said they would pay for it because I was a veteran. And I went through the same thing. I went all the way to logarithms, and I couldn't go any further. Some other stuff come up, and so I took the course twice in math, but I got to the point I loved math. Huh. Total turnaround from school. Mm-hmm. But I loved doing that. I couldn't wait for them books to come in so I could do the lessons.
Okay. Now, do you have photographs? You have photographs from your service. They're primarily group photographs from your training time. Do you have photographs from the Pacific at all of your boat?
No.
Okay,
There is one boat in the water picture.
But primarily the photographs you have are of your training
Of the ship.
era.
Yeah.
Okay, which you have.
And I got that right up in the paper I had, in Pawtucket.
Right, and that was after the sinking.
Yeah.
Okay. What did you think of your officers and fellow shipmates? Can you just speak briefly to that, please?
We're pretty good. I had no qualm with any of them. The boot camp chief, he was an excellent guy for training in camp. And the officers aboard ship were very good. And they were fun guys because they let a few things slide, which they weren't supposed to, but they did. And I remember one time we had the ship was in Boston, and I had the watch, and coming down the pier is this guy staggering all over the hill. And so this happened twice. It happened down in Panama and it happened in Boston. But he's staggering down and he comes up the gangplank and he stops and he has a bottle stuck in here. And the OD noticed it. He says, listen, he says, not going to let you aboard ship with that. He says, I want you to throw it overboard, get rid of it. So the guy turned around, and the OD turned around. The guy went down the plank, the gangplank, took off his shoes and dropped them overboard. And come back up, and the OD says, okay, go on to your bill. So he got aboard with that point. Down in Tijuana, this guy was doing the same thing, which I couldn't believe. Doing the same, not the same guy, some other guy. And this time we had to go through a gate manned by Marines. So we're walking in, and the Marines started to let us through. And oh, wait a minute, he says, come here. And he called the other guy back. And he says, what's that? With a club, and smashed this all in here. The poor guy hopping and jumping all over the place, trying to get rid of the glass and all the lacquer and everything else. And I said, I can't believe it. That's happened twice.
Now tell me, after the service, where did you settle? Tell us a little bit about, going back to school, college. Did you get any education supported by the GI Bill? Tell me about that.
Well, I'm one of the very, very few that never took anything out of the GI Bill.
Okay.
I never took school. I almost did. I was going to take flying lessons, but I kind of backed out of that.
Wasn't the math part of it, the math courses?
Huh?
The math courses? Part paid for by the service?
Yeah. But no, I never used any part of the GI at all, not even a hospitalization. And I got out of the Navy, and I come back home, and I didn't have a job or anything else. And I did have machine experience, mechanic.
Right.
A machinist, rather. So I got a job in the Potter and Johnson's up in Darlington. And I got a couple of years of that. And then I got claustrophobic. They had given me a big, long cutting job. And it was 8 hours just to make one cut. And I got bored because I was walking back and forth, getting like a caged cat. And I said, I can't keep doing this. So I quit, and my uncle says, well, come work for me. He was an electrician. And at that time, I wouldn't change a flashlight bulb. I was so scared of electricity. But I went to work for him. And I guess I worked for him 3-4 years. And I finally got to work on live stuff. But he did that by surprise. He didn't tell me it was alive. And but I learned my trade. I have 2 trades. I always remember him telling me, have 2 trades, you'll always have a job. Well, I was a machinist, and I was an electrician, so I know I didn't have to worry about work.
So you've worked your whole life as a machinist or as a...
No, as an electrician. I went more for electricity than I did a machinist.
We're at Whitney and post office.
And then I worked the post office and all that.
Did you worked as an electrician for the post office?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
When did you retire?
About, boy.
Oh, I gotta go way
15
back.
years ago.
I gotta go way, I don't know.
Probably in the early
I re-
1990s.
I retired from the post office.
Pratt Whitney first,
Yeah, I did Pat Whitney for
15 years.
12 years more. Then I went to the post office and I did that for 12 years. And I left the post office. That was after Pratt Whitney. And I went to work the following day. My daughter-in-law says, well, not her brother, I don't know, there's some relation in there. Her father was looking for a driver as a courier. So the following day I had another job. So I drove for him for 15 years.
This was before, up until you retired, or after retired?
After I
Oh,
retired.
okay. So you've done that for a while, up until now?
15 years.
Wow.
And then now he works for.
And then I left him because gas went to $3 a gallon. And that's too much. I'm not making money doing this. And I ended up the next day with the driving for the forest.
So in a sense, you're still working.
He's still
Yep.
working.
Well, that's good. That keeps you very vital.
He's 83 and he's still working.
Did you make any close friendships during the service that continued after the war?
Only one, and that was on the seagoing tug.
Okay. Can you tell
His
us?
name was Rob,
Okay. Tell us briefly about that.
and he lived in Illinois.
Okay.
And I drove out just once out to see him.
Okay.
My wife and I and the two kids went out to see him and his wife and kids, and then we drove back.
When was the last time you talked to him or heard from him?
That was the only time.
Oh, okay. So that's.
That was the only time.
Do you belong to any veterans organizations?
No.
Okay. Well, you've described to us your career. Would you say that your military experience influenced your thinking about war or about the military in general?
I think the military in general. I liked the Navy, and as long as I was in it, my good times surpassed my bad times. And I liked the Navy.
Well, did your military experience make you think that anything about war itself, whether you thought war was hell, whether you thought it was justified, whether you thought it was something that should be avoided at all costs, but did it change your philosophy about war, would you say? Do you have any
It's hard to say. I mean, I do get very upset
Today's
talking about my experience in the war, but I never reflected on it as, it can happen again or whatever. No, I didn't. It was a thing I had to do. I did it, and that was it.
And you went on with your life.
Yeah.
You attended some reunions. You've attended a few reunions. Could you please tell me briefly about that?
Yeah. We had a reunion. They ended up, they got together, a couple of guys got together and says, look, we got to have reunions. And so they started doing it.
This is for the crew of the Drexler.
Yeah.
and
Okay.
their survivor
Yeah.
family.
The survivors and survivors' families.
Right.
But I never knew they were doing it. And one day I got a letter in the mail, and it says, are you the William T. Burrows that served aboard the Drexler? And I said, wow, yeah. And I come to find out there was 12 other William T. Burrowses. So they sent a letter to everybody, and that's how I found out about the reunions.
Where did they hold the reunions?
Different places. One was in Tampa, one was in
Newport.
Norfolk, Virginia.
Place every year.
They picked a different place every year.
When was the last one you went to? A few years ago? Or?
About 8 years. About 8 years. Norfolk.
Yeah, I think it was in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay.
And I only went to about 3 of them, I got maybe 4. But I was way out of myself after that reunion. It just climbed up on me and just totally took me out of text. I was very, very upset on it and everything else, and I said, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. I mean, I should
He didn't
go to the
have a
reunions,
soul.
because we're all dying off one at a time. I had, to this day, I don't know how many live survivors there are left.
Right.
I could find out, but I'd have to,
Paper downstairs.
I would have to call,
Yeah.
And it tells you what, we got one down there.
I would have to call Gene Brick, who lives in Oregon,
Yeah, who died.
and he probably could, he would have a list of who's left.
Well, tell me this: how did your experience in the service affect your life? Could you briefly sum up how it affected you? Are there any comments you could make on that?
I don't know. That's a hard question. I don't know if I could say it affected me any different than the way I am. I'm a little bit of a prankster. I got that from my father, because he used to pull some beauties. And I do. I do a lot of practical jokes. Nobody gets hurt with them or anything else. And I'm a handyman, and I got that from my uncle. He always said, if you do a job and you don't like it, tear it apart and do it again. Which I kept that philosophy. I built this whole yard, just this whole wall behind me. Never did any woodwork in my life. I never did any cement work in my life. But this is what I got. I've redone this whole house. But I found out he was right. If it isn't right, tear it apart, do it again.
Okay.
And so I appreciate that. I do a lot of hobby work. I make games. I made bird houses out of PVC, the square piped, and I sold a lot of them. And I'm just handy. I love doing things.
Okay.
And right now, last night or the night before, I got an order for 2 more games. And I sell them for 35 bucks. Or 30, I should say. Plus shipping if I have to ship it. But
Well, you
I like doing it.
Career man, he loved
I
to.
like using my hands.
He's not telling all the story.
Now that cabinet right there, you look back at you, that used to be up and over the TV. And I cut it all out and ended up that way.